Well, hello, folks. Randy Reed here for Dojo Nation and Dojo Max. Listen, today's our little Tuesday tip. I'm a little under the weather. I'm going to try to get through this thing, but I didn't want to leave anybody hanging. So, what I want to talk a little bit about today is a subject that's kind of a hot topic. Always has been in martial arts. And that's the pricing of your martial arts lessons. And I've heard the good, the bad, the ugly on this sort of thing. It's been something that has been up for a lot of debate. So let's go over a couple of things. First, as far as pricing, you can only charge what the market can bear. And we talked last week about demographics, and your demographics are going to kind of dictate what your ability to charge is going to be. How much discretionary income do they have? And one of the things that I hear a lot is this blanket statements about what pricing should be, no matter where you're at. Once again, we discussed that in demographics last week. What I had done years ago is I was really studying some of the top schools in the country and figuring out, excuse me, Todd, I've had this little respiratory thing going on for a couple of weeks here. I don't know what it is, but hopefully it goes away soon. One of the things that we've discussed, as I said, that we discussed before, is how this pricing matches up to demographics and that sort of thing. And so in studying the top schools that I studied, I started to see some trends. And the trends were how their pricing compared to their medium household income and housing prices around their market. So let me give you an example. This was probably 10 years ago, but in Washington, D.C., and I think out in San Francisco, and I checked one other place, somewhere in Seattle, the average household income in that area was around, at that time, $130,000 a month. A lot of money, really good money, which leaves them a lot of discretionary income. And they were also in areas that had a lot of families, that sort of thing. So I checked Madison, Wisconsin, which where I'm familiar at. On the west side of town, it was running right around $68,000, $70,000, almost $50,000 a year or $4,000 a month in difference in income. Now rents are higher and all that sort of thing. But what I started seeing is I started messing around with the decimal points. So what I did was, what I found, if you take your medium household income, let's say it's $120,000, you took those 3 zeros off the end, move that decimal point over, that leaves you 120, right? $120. In Madison, if you'd move them off and the household income was, let's say 70,000, you're at 70. And I started comparing those around the country. And it seemed to me that the real successful schools were taking that base number, taking the zeros off, and if you took that times 1 to 1.5, that was kind of the starting point for most basic programs. Now, you can't go much under $100 to if you're going to run a martial arts school, I don't think, unless you're running it in a center with no rent or that sort of thing. But it got to be real interesting because some of the people were getting in trouble because they were taking that, you take that number, you take your decimal points off, and they were at 2, sometimes 3 times that number, and they were having a lot of trouble getting students in. They may get a few, there's always somebody in town that can afford it, but not the numbers they wanted. So then people would ask, well, how do you know if you should do it times 1, times 1.5? Then what do you do? Well, I found that for their second program, their upgrade, whatever that is, after the student had come in and got to know the school and the value, then they could do 2.5 times sometimes that price for their higher program. That means in Washington, D.C., for instance, they were able to charge $250, almost $300 for their black belt advanced placement programs. So, and as I watch those numbers, so now the next number we ask ourselves is, how do you know how many times you can do that multiple? 1 time, 2 times, 3. Well, that came down to their referral rates. And it seemed like the higher their referral rates, the more students they got in for referrals, of course, that means their program is more appreciated by their students. They're doing a better job. They're getting referrals. That allowed them to even charge a higher rate. Conversely, the people that aren't getting in much in the way of referrals probably aren't doing the job they should be doing in their schools. They were having trouble getting even 1 time that number. So I encourage you, first off, to figure out what your average household income is in your area. Pull off the 3 decimal points and see what that number is, and start looking at how that compares to what you're doing. Now, there's always outliers. There's always people that are super, super good, and maybe they can do better at the beginning, or maybe they're a more established school. There's some other factors in there, but it's a general starting point. If I'm sitting at the table with a bunch of guys and one town has an average household income of $70,000, $80,000, the other one has 120, 150. I saw one in Dallas one time that was, I think, over 300,000. So it gives you a point of where you're at and where that discretionary income is kind of at out there. And it gives you at least a starting point to look at A, your pricing, and B, make sure you got those referrals coming in the right way. So that's what we got for today, folks. Hope that helps a little bit when you're thinking about your pricing. Randy Reed, over and out.